Okay, we have made it to the end of the school year and to Unit 8. The Unit 8 talks about events that lead up to the Civil War, such as Manifest Destiny, as well as all the other wars with the natives and everything like that before we have the Civil War. Okay, first of all, what is Manifest Destiny? It is the nation's mission to spread freedom by settling the whole continent. So for us at the time, we were at like Louisiana Purchase, kind of on the Mississippi River, and we're wanting to go all the way across to current-day California. The phrase was created by John O'Sullivan to have people spread across the nation and possess the whole continent that God gave the Americans, according to him, which is where we get the painting over to the side here. You see the woman, she's carrying not just a book about it, but she's carrying the power lines, and she's following all of those who are pioneers. They're pushing the natives out and the buffalo and everything like that. At the time, the American President Polk encouraged this United States expansion and agreed to put the northern U.S. border between Britain and the United States on the 49th degree latitude line. This famous painting of Manifest Destiny can be interpreted in many different ways. It's over to the right, but you can also see on the right side of it things that are already established. So that would be like where the Mississippi River was and how there's already cities in certain places. Okay, now during Manifest Destiny, we had to create a whole bunch of different states, and it took a lot of effort to do that. First one, Oregon, was where we had a lot of fur traders from Europe come in, and the United States and China, and they were the first people to live there. They hunted specifically for beavers, more than any others, to sell at the fashion industry, and these men also created the Oregon Trail, settling in the farming areas. You have Florida, then, which was originally given to the U.S. by Spain in July 17th, 1821, and then became a U.S. official property under the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Tallahassee, which is its capital, became the territory capital in 1824, and it originally then becomes a state in March 3rd, 1845, so about 20 years before it became an actual state. Iowa becomes a state in 1846, right after Florida does. New Mexico, in this territory, you have a big enough area that's covered by part of present states. New Mexico wasn't originally just that square. So the original size of the New Mexico territory included New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. And so it's a really big area. The Native Americans and Mexican soldiers, as well as conquistadors, explored that area since the 1500s. The Santa Fe Trail goes through this area and starts in Independence, Missouri, ending in New Mexico. Okay, so you have a whole bunch. At the time, New Mexico is a lot bigger than what we have today. Okay, the Utah Territory, which becomes a state, is a religious refuge for the Mormons, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They are led by Brigham Young, and the Mormons are settling there to escape judgment for their different beliefs based upon like different types of Christianity. They become a state in 1896. Okay, now looking at Texas, we can see that Texas obviously wasn't the original size that it was. Okay, in 1821, Mexico won independence from Spain, claiming that area and became a state or a country within itself, May 14th, 1836. The Mexican government then offers land to families who settle and establish towns in their territory. And the requirements that they have is that if a person lives in a Mexican territory, they have to learn Spanish and follow the Catholic religion. So that includes areas of Texas. Unfortunately, what this means, though, is the United States, we have Americans who start to outnumber the Mexican people and get a little greedy. And the Mexican government is shutting down the border to stop people from immigrating into the Texas area by 1830 because they're having too many Americans who don't want to follow the rules. Okay, so this is where we get to the Alamo, March 16th, 1836. The Mexican general Antonio Santa Anna went to San Antonio with thousands of soldiers to control the large amounts of people from the United States and how they were forcefully taking over Mexican cities. So like I said, we got a little greedy. We were given this chance to have this land by just following two rules, but we just didn't listen. And so they fight with generals and soldiers against Americans who were barricaded in the mission called the Alamo. So it's kind of like a fort. This was a famous fight between about 180 Americans versus thousands of soldiers from Mexico. Famous men like Davy Crockett and William Travis are the ones that fought here. And this battle lasts about 13 days, with soldiers killing most of the people, but leaving behind women and children to tell the story of the Alamo. And that's where we get that phrase like, remember the Alamo, coming from them. And it's mainly because the women and children who survived. Okay, then we go to California. We get all the way across the nation to California. The territory was first established by the Spanish missionaries to convert the Native Americans over to Catholicism. This idea for the natives was also to help them learn to farm and weave and do ranching. President Polk first offers to buy that entire territory for about $30 million from, it's no longer Spain, from Mexico, and it became a Mexican state in 1821. Eventually, California declares their own independence from Mexico in May 13th of 1846, so they want to be their own country, and they are for about 2 months, well, 1 to 2 months. They become a free state in the U.S. They join the United States by June 14th, 1846, so about a month or so. The U.S. uses the Rio Grande as the territory border between Mexico and the United States. That's still in place now. And in the end, after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the U.S. gains about 500,000 square miles and paid Mexico around $18.25 million for it. So a little over half of what we originally offered. Then we have the gold rush in California. Gold begins to be found in the hills of California in 1848 by Sutter's Mill, which is one of the first places where they see that. Okay, so this gold comes in and everybody gets excited because it's going to get a lot of money if they find the gold. And it causes a huge rush of people from the United States, from Asia and Europe to immigrate to the U.S. trying to earn that money and find that gold. Despite many times having no experience in mining and not finding actual gold. These people who were searching for gold in 1849 is called, how we get the idea of the 49ers. They would try to find gold in streams, as well as a method called panning. And they would use these pans in stream beds to sift through the pebbles and trying to find gold dust or pebbles. So they'd dip it into the water and they'd have all this dirt or all these rocks, and they'd have to sift through it with the water to try and see if they can find those flecks of gold. Okay, this doubled the world's supply of gold despite having hardly any large amounts of gold found. So it's not like they find giant rocks of it. It's very small pebbles, I'd say like sand, kind of. Okay, and the main ways people made money was to sell resources that are needed to mine. So Levi Strauss, the jean company that we have, they sold mining pants to make him rich, and that company is still now around today. So instead of the people that actually found the gold making a ton of money, it's everyone who gave them supplies is who got a bunch of cash there. All right, now we start to see, because of all of this type of economics, we start to see the separation between the North and the South. Okay, the North is more focused on industrialization and factories. They have 3 phases of industrialization. Number 1 is the employers making factory worker jobs in smaller steps to get things done faster. Second is entrepreneurs building factories for specialized workers and products that they invent. And the third is that workers began using machines to complete tasks. So when they work faster, they make more, and then it increases that profit. So instead of one person doing the entire job, they take and make it into multiple steps, but it's smaller steps to make things go faster. So mass production of cotton is what happens around the early 1800s, and to ship these materials, inventors create steam engines to travel the railroads, not like steamboats, steam engines. They also use tracks for traveling to new parts of the country, and by 1860 there were around 31,000 miles of railroad tracks, mostly in the North and Midwest areas. Okay, so in the South, they were primarily based on farming and slavery, as well as their trade for slaves and farming. Mainly the growth of cotton, rice, indigo, and tobacco industries is what you see through all their farming. Inventions for getting better farm work helped to increase profit. Cotton gin, for instance, increases sales by 50 times more. The steel-tipped plow by John Deere cut through the hard-packed sod in the Midwest. And this allowed for more people to successfully settle in new territories and states. So especially in places like South Dakota, Nebraska, western Kansas, it's really hard to separate the dirt in a good way to farm. So that steel-tipped plow was making things a lot easier. Plus we know that John Deere is still around today. Obviously they didn't just stop at the steel tip plow. They also have a mechanical reaper and thresher by Cyrus McCormick, which increased wheat, fruit, and vegetable production. And McCormick is still around now. It's basically like a seasoning industry for all of our foods. The slavery market also increased because of this, and plantations became a commonplace in the South. It had slaves working as housemaids, cooks, blacksmiths, carpenters, shoemakers, weavers, and many other ones such as field hands. They were watched by overseers, many of them working over 12 hours a day. And then because of this, we see these bad treatments of people. This is where we start to see like the slavery and abolition come into place, where people start to try and help them get out of being slaves in the South. The increased slavery caused for concern of their health and well-being, because a lot of times they weren't treated very well. The overseers are the ones with the whips, and they punish them badly. They take away their food. Reasons for escaping, mainly for the actual slaves themselves, was freedom, as well as finding lost relatives who may have been sold to a different plantation, and escaping those bad punishments that they had already dealt with. Famous figures that we know about today are Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who helped run the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad obviously wasn't an actual railroad. It was kind of just like a traveling system, a secret way that people could escape, and it helped over 100,000 slaves escape to the north and get away slavery. Slaves would travel by night, on foot, guided by the North Star or hints that were left on other trails. And these hints aren't like a sign. That's not what they are. We'll talk about it here in a second. But you have abolitionists who step in as well, people who stand up for the slaves. William Lloyd Garrison has made one of the first writings against slavery, written in what's called the Liberator newspaper. You also have Sarah and Angelina Grimke. Born and raised on a plantation in South Carolina, they moved to Philadelphia and fight against slavery as well as for women's rights. So those girls are raised on a plantation, but they realize how bad it is and they go against it. Harriet Beecher Stowe, who escaped slavery and writes the famous book of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's a book that was actually banned in the South for a while for its description and truth about slavery. Frederick Douglass escaped slavery in 1838 and goes to Massachusetts. Then he becomes a famous anti-slavery public speaker. He has kind of the big hair that we see in some of the pictures of him. And then Sojourner Truth escapes in 1826, and then in 1827, taking her children with her and helping to rescue their slaves. So she becomes free, goes back and gets her kids, and then helps other people go back. So she's very famous for going back and forth between the North and the South, helping people travel the Underground Railroad. And this is what I'm talking about when there's a whole bunch of different routes. Obviously, like in the South Carolina, you'd have to jump on a boat and go north, or in Missouri, there might be going on a railroad or in an underground area to get there. Quilting hints were help them navigate the Underground Railroad as well. Certain patterns mean certain things. So, for instance, if you look over on the right side where it says basket, that type of shape would tell them, oh, this is a really safe place to hide. You need to be in this area. You won't get caught. At the time, their women's right reformations were also happening, with the factory system increasing. This allowed for more jobs, especially for women. Negative effects include that women are paid half as much as men. They weren't allowed to be in unions, and many of them would allow for like over 12 hours, including working the children and not just the ladies. Okay, to fight this between 1830s and 40s, women began to protest and form their own organizations. Famous ladies like Susan B. Anthony, Sarah Bagley, the Lowell Female Reformation Organization, Lucretia Mott, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton are all famous for different parts of the women's right reformation. All of this eventually leads to the 19th Amendment, where women have the right to vote. Okay, you also have a whole bunch of other legislation that gets started, like the Compromise of 1850 between California and D.C., the Fugitive Slave Act, which talks about the things that are happening in the North, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which passed in 1854 to help with the new states of territories of Kansas and Nebraska. Missouri Compromise is where we know that the Missouri was the slave state and Maine was the free. Okay, Confederate versus Union. At the very end here, we start to see the beginning of the Civil War. After Lincoln is elected as president in his first term, South Carolina secedes from the Union in December of 1860. Following February of 1861, you have 6 other states who follow them. And by March of 1861, the U.S. is separated into Confederate and Union states. This is where we stop and we start to see,